So last year, this time, Ryan Blackburn and I were saying that Coach Malone's a top 3 coach in the league.
Right.
Michael Malone, I argue, should have been up for Coach of the Year. He's went to the playoffs 6 straight years. They just won 57 games and wasn't even near the top of the leaderboard, apparently because his team is so loaded, even though the only person that got any award love is Nikola Jokic, which makes no sense to me. Malone has been greatly and rightfully accredited with the success of the Denver Nuggets. But this year, if you look at the second round, blown out in game 2 on their home floor by 32. They lost game 1 because of late game execution. Defensive rotations were not there. They lost by 45 points, up 3-2 in game 6 in Minnesota. And then they subsequently in game 7 ran out of energy at the top of the third quarter, up 20, and then lose the game. And the offense fell completely apart. And they just didn't seem to make any relevant adjustments that they needed to make.
Right.
Ryan, when you look at this Michael Malone year in totality, when 57 games won, tied the franchise record, they won a lot of home games, won a lot of away games, but the offense didn't seem to feel the same this year. The defense was considerably better all year. Do you think this was a strong year from Coach Michael Malone, and how much of the second round loss do you think is on Malone and some of his coaching decisions as a whole?
It's a good question, and it's a nuanced question because I think it's really difficult for us on the outside to evaluate exactly how well or poorly a coach does, because what we see from these guys is like 5 to 10% of what they're doing on a consistent basis. They have things that they're dealing with behind the scenes, players, coaches, relationships, everything under the sun. I think that Michael Malone's really good at handling those things behind the scenes. I think he's really good at connecting people, motivating people, making sure that they're all pushing the same direction. I also think he's kind of a bull in the china shop in a little bit, where he sees red when he wants to really win a basketball game, can get a little bit too locked in at times. And there is definitely some moments where he's got to let go of the steering wheel a little bit. He's got to let the team do what they need to do in order to be successful. Now, that's a hard thing to do when you're watching something going on and you're watching guys not necessarily play with the level of intensity and focus that they're supposed to. And like, especially when you've got a young bench that you're trying to orchestrate as well. So I think that Michael Malone needed to take a little bit more of a hands-off approach this year, let those guys make more mistakes, and like, just given the roster that he had, find more opportunities for them to develop, as opposed to holding on for dear life, trying to win 57 games, as many games as possible during the regular season, and then not have the team be really ready, not have the young players really be ready to contribute in a playoff environment. That seems like an oversight to me. That seems like it could have been better. Despite the fact that, like you said, I think Michael Malone's a top 3 to 5 coach in the league. And I think he's like, that hasn't changed based off of this loss.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, to be fair to Malone, like, the players he was depending on most in the second round were Christian Brown, second-year player, Justin Holiday, veteran minimum, and then Reggie Jackson, who was kind of a castaway for multiple franchises. So it was not like the bench was like crazy. And again, the starters weren't good enough. But again, he also talked about this in the season press conference, that he thinks that it could have played into it the fact that he played them too much. Again, the starters played like 1,100 minutes together in the regular season.
It was a lot.
Like,
more than anybody.
More than anyone by a considerable amount. I think the second was the Thunder, I want to say. And the Thunder are a bunch of children, like literally, like they're, some not even old enough to buy a legal drink in America.
Yeah.
So I do think some of it is like, okay, Malone, maybe for the sake of winning, maybe they need to be a 4 seed next year. If they're going to have this strategy, at least, Ryan, if they're going to have young guns off the bench and it's not going to make a lot of sense, they're not going to play well. And they're going to be whatever. And that's what Calvin Booth wants. Maybe they need to just be a 4 seed then. And then that way they're like, look, we're going to win 52, 51 games this year just because them dudes are going to make a lot of mistakes. Those lineups, they're plus minus. It's not going to be great. And they're going to have a lot of stuff they're going to have to work out. But by playoff, they're just going to be ready, locked in. And by the time the playoffs come around, the starters are going to have energy. The young guns are going to know what they're going to have to do. And they're not going to be your typical 50-win team in a tough West, or maybe in a different West next year, a 48-win team as the 4 seed next year. So, I just think some of this is like he didn't have great options behind him, but Malone We've watched him since he got to Denver. He just has his ways, and he has the things that he presses the button on. And when I saw him in this Minnesota Timberwolves series in Game 6 and Game 7 start Joker at the top of the second quarter, I knew that he was pressing the button. He wanted to win very badly. But, man, I just think Chris Finch, the Naz Reid stuff, the Nikhil stuff, the Conley, like adjusting to the Nuggets defense, adjusting to the personnel, the way they were guarding Joker, not enough counters in that third quarter in Game 7. There were just a lot of things that I just think they could have done better overall. And again, I think some of the Nuggets players, they got a little timid in that third quarter, looking for Joker to have all the answers. But I do think Malone, I would say for the first time in a minute, I think got out coached in that series.
I think it's probably fair. I think that when you have collapses like Denver did in games 2, game 6, and then the second half of game 7, it's important for a coach to be able to refocus the team, to not let go of the rope, to find ways to change up what you're doing, and to have an air of confidence about you that the team can get it done. And I don't think that he had that. I also think that it's possible that the Nuggets players knew that they couldn't get it done and that they were gassed and that they didn't have any more to give. And that's a problem, obviously. And that comes back to both coaching and decision making there, but also roster construction and making sure you have the right players available to play. But it's tough, man. Like the nuance of this is so difficult because on one hand, you want to blame the coach for not doing the right things, for not making the right decisions, for not getting the young players ready to play. On the other hand, maybe whatever Michael Malone could have possibly done wouldn't have gotten the young players ready to play, wouldn't have turned Zeke Naji or uh, Julian Strother into the playoff caliber players that the Nuggets may have needed them to be heading into the regular season. And there was nothing that Malone could have done. Uh, but I also think that you're right that this is a nuanced thing that this is one of those opportunities where Michael Malone I think can look himself in the mirror, say that he did give himself all, like he gave all that he had, but maybe it wasn't the right thing, and maybe this is a good opportunity for him to kind of sit back, understand what needs to happen, and adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I also want to say that it's on Booth. If you're asking Malone to play young players, then for me it's like, well, give him young players he will play, which is go to the top of the board, go to the top 14 and say, look, here's a blue chip. This is a person can give you good minutes and be in the rotation and work well. And for me, that's kind of what it is too. It's like if Booth is going to have this strategy and he's going to expect Malone to play these guys, well, then I just don't think the 29th, 32nd, and 37th pick is the way to go.
Not the way to
go. You lucked out with Christian and lucked out with Peyton. But like even then, Zeke Naji was 22 for Denver in 2020? Yeah. He's not playing. Yeah. So why that's what I'm saying, Ryan. If it's youth, okay, well then don't draft every draft 2 to 3 players. Go get one bona fide player and go just live with it. Oh, I'm sorry. The Nuggets got J-Dub at 12, J-Dub at 11. Oh, now is J-Dub and Christian off the bench? Well, no wonder they're a dynasty. That makes more sense to me.
The Nuggets have the 28th overall pick in the draft this year, and I sympathize with Michael Malone that whoever the Nuggets do end up picking, let's say that they don't move up. Let's say they go get some sort of backup center, or let's say they get some sort of backup point guard. Nuggets fans are going to be clamoring for this guy to play consistently every single time, and it might be the right decision. But if you keep feeding young players in a situation where you just got to win, you got to win one playoff game, you got to win one championship, like right at the end of the year, everything's got to be so concentrated there. I sympathize with Michael Malone and that is a hard thing to constantly do in this case, rather than just going out and getting the right veterans needed in order to be successful. So I think that Denver can start that in free agency. I think maybe there's a trade that they could make that adds the right piece that can really bolster what the starting lineup does. But it's going to be on Malone to piece it all together. At the end of the day, the buck stops with him. He's got to make the right decisions and he's got to motivate the team. He's got to put them in the best positions to succeed. I will also say, just one on one of the previous points we made, he did have his hand kind of tied behind his back with some of the Murray injury stuff, some of the versatility that the Nuggets like to pride themselves upon. It's very possible that the things that they tried to do, that they wanted to do, they couldn't because of Murray being compromised and Michael Porter not being able to get free from Jaden McDaniels, which nobody can get free from Jaden McDaniels except for Luka Doncic. So it's understandable, I guess.
I guess, I just think, I'm looking at a couple players and I'm looking at Calvin Booth and Malone. I'm just like, look, I get it, and I don't agree with Nick Wright often, but Nick Wright, he did say something. I think I told you,
yeah,
Jokic has taken Malone and everybody else up to the penthouse, and they're like, "Oh, look at our place. This is nice. Like, we live here." It's like, well, you do, but you live here because of 15. And my whole thing is like, I just want them to have that understanding that literally everything we do now is about 15. And if 15 doesn't have what he needs, we haven't done our job. That really should be the mindset. I mean, with all due respect, obviously.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I think Michael Malone knows that better than just about anybody in the world.
He's mentioned this plenty of times before. And he said, remember one time he said, I'm a very insecure person and Jokic is my security.
Yeah. Like, no wonder he's playing 47 minutes, man. I get it. I understand. Like, I would do the same thing. It's understandable, but he's got to make the tough decisions. And sometimes that tough decision is not using your security blanket, is developing a better system. So we'll see what happens, man. I'm very curious to see how he responds next year.
Yeah. Let us know what you think in the comment section. Do you think the series versus the Timberwolves was on Michael Malone? Do you think that he was a top 5 coach this year? What do you expect differently from Malone next year? Do you think he has the young guys on the roster or will have them that he can utilize? Or does he need another veteran to help sharpen up the rotation? This is Ryan Blackburn, a.k.a. Ryan Sharpburn, the boy Swipa, Mile High Sports. Y'all know what time it is. See you on the other side.